Good morning, friends. This is Chandra from Akulmac Technologies, and I graciously invite you to our show about skills gap that exists in India. And today we have very eminent personality on our show to discuss about this particular aspect. That is Mr. Neville Gaunt. Neville had a long career in FTSE 250 companies at both strategic and operational levels. His corporate and commercial finance background is gained over 30 years in international businesses, mainly in the oil and gas industry, dealing with large and small businesses and complex supply chains. He has accomplished track record of negotiating the business means of short and long-term commercial, political, and environmental forces that influence all decisions. Neville Gaunt is also well-known international keynote speaker and a co-author of a bestseller book called Is Your Mind Fit for Goals? The Missing Link to Your Success. Go and read this book. Good morning, Neville. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Chandra. I hope you're well.
Thank you. So, before we start in this particular discussion, this discussion is around communication. So, we will discuss certain aspects of communication. Let me recap on what happened last week, and so that we can there is a continuation. Last week we touched upon can-do attitude, which is paramount or the most important attribute that a leader can have. And this week we would like to touch upon the subject of communication. So without further ado, let me have Mr. Neville and his 2 cents on this subject.
Well, unfortunately, it's a bit more than 2 cents, but we'll try and keep it to a succinct start because communication, as we all know, is a massive subject. It's this huge construct. But it's important to have the right attitude to enter into a communication opportunity. And sometimes that communication actually is just with yourself. Thinking of what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, what you're going to write, and how you're going to write it. Because if you're not in that real pumped up attitude, when you start to write something, it's not going to flow. It's going to be really difficult to put words down on paper. So it's not just having a positive mental attitude, it's the can-do attitude. We're going to be hitting that over every subject that we talk about. But what is it about communication? To you, Chandra, communication is one of the core skills of anybody. We talked previously about a baby walking. Well, the next thing is learning how to communicate more. So what is it to you about communication that's vitally important in this really rather complex world?
Well, it's a very tough subject, even though it sounds easy. But let me try to attempt answering this in 2 cents, or maybe more, maybe four. So in communication, there are various kinds of communication. There are verbal communications, there are non-verbal communications. Sometimes without saying things, you try to communicate what you are thinking. So there are various stages of communication. And most important aspect for a leader is how do you use all of these special areas of communication to convey your message in a very positive manner. So that is a skill which not people have it inherently. They will have to learn by experience. They will have to learn from gurus who have done that, and it's basically an art. So while everybody knows how to talk, but how do you communicate in a very positive manner is really something that needs to be learned, acquired, and you need a teacher who can take you there. That is my feeling.
I mean, it's very true. I mean, we do learn to talk at an early age. What we don't learn to do is to listen. And one of the core components of being able to communicate well is to listen. You know, you mentioned about, you know, not talking. That is a great example. You know, don't fill the silence. Silence is there for a reason. It allows the other person opportunity to think. And that is the can-do attitude. We're going to go back to that one again. So if I'm throwing words at you at 50 to the minute and you're having to listen because I'm going so fast and you really don't know what I'm talking about and it's going, typically that's what people are doing to you all the time. So you've got to be smart. You've got to think about, who am I talking to? What do they want to hear? How can I get them to listen? Can I be engaging? Now, these are all questions that you've got to answer. So when we are in a business, one of the first things we do is we network. Well, there are all sorts of forms of networking. And sometimes when you go and join a new network and you walk into the room, you see little factions of people that have gathered. They meet every week and they go to that same corner every week and they talk to the same people every week. That's not networking. Networking is going and working the network. I mean, those net and working were put together and no one really understands that how to network. So without these basic communication skills, you're not going to be able to network. And one of those key ones, I'm going to go back to it because it's really, really important, is to listen. What is your audience saying? What problem are you going to solve? And typically, we'll get into a situation where we've got verbal diarrhea. We just throw it out and we just hope that some of it will sit. And if you notice some of the we've got great opportunity these days. We don't have to go far to learn how to do things really well. You know, we spoke previously about having to walk 5 miles to the local library to see the Encyclopedia Britannica. You know, you and I are of a certain age where Google it wasn't a phrase, just didn't exist. But today we can Google anything. And there are some fantastic places to go and find out how to speak properly. You don't need to go on a course how to speak properly. You need to get in front of a mirror and start speaking. And see if you can entertain yourself. Because if you can't entertain yourself, what chance have you got with everybody else? So if you're saying something that's of value and you want people to listen, you need to change the tone. Take it up, take it down. Move it very fast, take it very slow. Now, these are techniques that we can practice in the bath, in the shower, you know, on the way to work, in the car. We don't have to go on a course. And I think that's one of the main things I'll get over to people is there are some fantastic books written on communication. Go and read the book. But the most important thing is go and practice it. Because you can speed read a book, but it's practice, putting it into practice that makes it yours. It's your delivery. And I notice now that we're having a communication. You haven't said anything for 3 or 4 minutes, but I can see you're engaged. You're looking at me at 8,000 miles away, and we're still having a communication. And people listening in are listening. They're engaged, or they should be. If they're not, go away and have a cup of tea and come back later. Right. But let's break down one of the biggest areas that I find that's a problem with communication. So let me ask you a simple question. You write emails to people, do you? Quite a few per day? I mean, some are automated, I know, because you're in the IT world, and I've got lots of automated emails, you know. But when you write an email, who are you writing it for?
Well, to answer your question, personally, when I write emails, my journey has been few decades. So I've gone through various phases of writing email. So when I write email in today's time and today's world, I have learned the art of using minimum words to convey maximum message. So I usually write a very short email. It doesn't mean that I don't respect the other person, but I use all the right words. But I try to minimize the length of the email so that it conveys in the first paragraph what I want to say. So that's my way of doing things when it comes to writing an email.
Okay. Well, the good thing about an email is that you don't have to read this, because that's my scribble. Okay. The good thing about an email is that it's typed.
Right.
But if it's typed, there's an opportunity for spelling errors. And there's an opportunity for grammar that's a problem.
Right.
And what you said is perfect. Keep it short, keep it simple. Don't put too much flowery language in, because it's the person on the other side that's reading the email. You're not writing the email for you. You're brilliant. You know what you want to say. You can say it in 10 words or you can say it in 10,000 words. So the key, when I ask this question to chief executives mainly, in a hall of 1,000 people, and I will say, who are you writing the email for? They will say, well, I'm writing it for me.
Okay.
And they really do mean that, because it's an automatic response. They have the buzzers, and I say it's A for me, B for you, and they all press me. The majority press me because I'm writing it for me. Who else would I be writing it for? And the key thing is, well, if you're writing it for me, then yourself, then why are you writing it? There's absolutely no point. So
Right.
what you've got to do is when you're in this mode of communication, you've got to think, why am I doing it? And who am I doing it for? And then you'll be able to get that message over far quicker, far simpler. And as Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it. And that's why the few words is really important.
Certainly. In fact, I like to make a comment here. I think all of us need to learn from politicians. When the politicians speak, they probably 100 times or maybe 99% they speak rubbish. But the key here is, they communicate with people. Whether somebody is watching them on TV or in a rally, they are trying to communicate at the inception level, and every word has a meaning for everyone in the crowd. So I think that's the biggest skill the politicians have.
Now, it's a fantastic skill. And if you notice, they always answer the question that you haven't asked. They will answer the question they want to answer. Now that's a really good skill as well, by the way. And the thing is, it's a brilliant example because the politicians are always on the TV. We can learn how not to do it. So there's no point in learning how to do it right all the time. We need to be able to absorb an opportunity of how not to do it. And sometimes, if you go Google how not to speak in public, is a good Google. How to speak in public, you'll get thousands. You get something like 750 million hits in 0.75 of a second. But if you Google the opposite, how not to speak in public, then you're not going to get as many, but you're going to get some fantastic examples of how not to do it. And looking at examples, again, you don't have to go on a communication course. There are some fantastic movie writers, script writers, some directors, some actors in the world. When we go to the movies, we go to be entertained. But we forget, actually, that is a form of them communicating to us. And we can see how the best people do it.
Right.
And so we can, if we're listening, this word listening, it's very close to learning. It's listening and learning. We can learn from lots and lots of different opportunities. Someone said to me when I was very young, Neville, if you stop learning, you will die. Now they meant it seriously, because we were in an English lesson, so it was a bit of a script. But I was very young when I listened to it, and my English teacher said, when you stop learning, you'll die. So if you take that on board, you're forever learning. That means you're listening, you're thinking, you're doing something. We come back to this word doing. Even sitting down and listening, you're doing something, as long as you're listening and not procrastinating. As they say, procrastination is the thief of time, and it's your time that's been stolen,
Right.
but you're allowing it. So stop allowing it and really engage, really listening. Just like hopefully people are engaged with us here. We're trying to give some basic information. We're not going to take you right up here. We're not going to give you the degree course in communication, because frankly, you don't need it. You just need to know how to communicate, when to communicate, who you're communicating to, and more importantly, why. We forget to ask that question. And I find a lot of business owners are so keen to get their message out so fast that they just forget who they're speaking to.
True.
Whether that's in, a 2-page document, I see we have lots of things. It comes over every time. I mean, this is just a passport visa that I had. And on the front, it says it's about passport visas. And by the way, inside your pictures. So there's lots of simple forms of communication, but equally, we could get a 2-page pamphlet flyer come in on email, on a PDF, and it's full of everything they could ever think of, including their mother's maiden name. You don't need to know that.
Right.
White space, blank space is really good, because it will focus me in. I mean, I've got to pull up, anyone that does any exhibiting or goes to a networking meeting and say, bring your pull-ups, bring your pop-ups, or whatever you call them. Well, I've got one up behind me. It's not full of words. It's not got lots of words that I've got to go into. It's not a busy picture. It's a very simple picture, and it focuses the mind. At the top it says attitude. It's cut off a bit here. Then there's a logo, and then underneath it says, have you a can-do attitude? That's all it says. Now, you can't see that, but if you were exhibiting or going to a networking meeting, it's a very simple message. And if you want to come over and say, what's a can-do attitude? Then we've got an opportunity to have a conversation. But if I were to fill that with, this is what we do, this is how we do it, here's our testimonials, and then right at the very bottom, oh yeah, we better put the website on. Oh, and I better put Neville at mindfitlimited.com. No one can read that, not from a distance. Yours is very similar. This is who you are. This is what you do. There's your strap line, and behind there's a little picture. But how many times do we walk and we see someone's pop-up and it gives you their life story? Again, it's simple stuff, but who's really thinking about it? We get wrapped up in this world of, I've got to get everything on the paper, rather than just put a few words out there. If they're interested, they'll come back. Because guess what? If someone isn't interested, do you really want to be talking to them? As a business owner,
It's a waste of
you don't. If they're not captured by what you're saying, they're helping you by ignoring you. In sales speak, they say, actually, all we want is a no. So a really good salesperson will say, get to the no, get to the no, get to the no, get to the no. Because as soon as I get a no, I can go and talk to someone else who might be interested. So having that right form of communication and engagement, is really, really important. We can't stress it enough. I mean, it is the number one skill set that an entrepreneur needs. The number one out of, we classify 10, and it's communication, problem solving skills, being self-motivated, working under pressure, organisation skills, team working, absolute must team working. How can you collaborate otherwise? The ability to learn and adapt. We don't learn this at school. It's a practice we've got to do. Numeracy skills, not how to do calculus or real big brainstorming sessions that's going to send you to the moon. Don't need that. Just basic numeracy. Valuing diversity and difference. We talk about inclusion these days. Really important. And finally, negotiation skills. And all of those I've said, if you can't communicate, you can't do the rest. It's going to be really hard to do the rest. So what we need to leave people with today is go out there and practice. Write down all of the communication skills you think you've got. And don't worry whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. Work out the ones that you need to go and do your job effectively. And an entrepreneur has to be a jack of all trades, not a master of any of them. I do an awful lot of public speaking. I had to practice that. When I talk one-to-one, I have to practice that. I have to look at the person I'm talking to make sure that we're engaged all the time. And silence is good.
Very true, because many times, as you rightly pointed out, that you don't want to give your brochure which has a lot of jargon written on it. So I'm using these words because I know for sure myself, my image, when people look at me, or my brochure or my logo, that has a life of shelf life is of 20 seconds. So I know for sure as an entrepreneur that my image has a shelf life of 20 seconds. So within 20 seconds, I have to make or break it. So I have to make sure that, I don't speak too much, because speaking too much will put off the people, Instead of that, how much I can achieve in 20 seconds. I can make them remember me, my company, my logo, my products. And that is what I want, because in 20 seconds, he's not carrying an order book with him and he's not going to close the order. So I have to know exactly what I can do in 20 seconds, because that is my image shelf life.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And the interesting thing is, you talk about image, that is a form of communication. We talked around the subject by a pop-up. That's my image. Do I believe it? Yes, I do believe it, by the way. Because if you don't have the can-do attitude, you will get nowhere. You may be lucky and someone will say, do you know what, I really need to talk to that person. I don't like what they say things too quickly, but they've got something that I desperately need. Then you're lucky, because they've seen something in you that you've not portrayed. But why not be the other way around? Portray the good stuff. Show people how good you are. Show people you can listen to what they're saying. As I say, we can go to the movie. It doesn't matter whether you go to a Bollywood movie or you go to 1917, which has just been released in the UK, won all the BAFTAs. It doesn't matter what movie you go to. You've got a brilliant director. You've got some fantastic actors. You've got some really good script writers. Just look at how they're giving you the message over the screen. And the point is, if you don't get the message that they're giving you, then the likelihood is they're not a very good director, they're not a very good actor, they're not a very good script writer, and you don't want to follow them. But we can learn an awful lot just by opening our eyes, being aware, and seeing what's out there in our daily life. And the other thing, of course, is um, when I did my degree course, I'm not a prolific reader. That's probably an admission, but I'm 61, so it doesn't make any difference these days. But all of my subject tutors would say, read around the subject. Now, if they'd have said, go to the movies and read around your subject, I'd have probably thought, that's a good idea. Because in an hour and a half, 2 hours, a very good movie script, I can pick up the highlights of a good book. So guess what? If you look at all of the really good books that have ever been written, including religious books, there's a movie. The movie may not be perfect, okay? But it gives you enough of the message for you to understand it and start thinking. So the point is, you don't have to go out of your way to see good examples. You don't even have to go and Google it, frankly. But if you do Google it, have fun, you know? Watch the mistakes. Stand up in front of a mirror, go over those mistakes and make sure you don't make those mistakes again. You know, we can practice a tremendous amount in our private life to get it right in our public life. And of course, no one's perfect. You know, if you get it wrong, just say, you know what, that wasn't very good, was it? And I have on occasion stood up in front of a big audience and said, I don't know what that sounded like to you, but it wasn't how I scripted it. So let me go over that again, you know. Because if it didn't sound right to me, and I'm the one who's speaking it, like Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it. So keep it simple. In the old leadership books, there's this phrase called KISS. And I learned KISS, Kiss, as keep it simple, stupid. These days, a lot of people say, oh, no, we don't like the word stupid. Well, that's how I learned it. So it was fine by me, you know, because if I don't keep it simple, I am being stupid, you know, and no one buys from stupid people.
Or,
not even if they're desperate.
Or we can replace the word from being stupid to spendulous. You know, you can say keep it simple and spendulous. So things like that.
There you go. There you go. But as I say, you know, we've tried to condense a very, very big subject into something quite simple. But the main thing that we've got here, leadership is about taking action. So if you need to be able to communicate with people, and I suggest that if you say no to that, then I'd like to find the island you're living on, because you're not communicating to anybody, including yourself. But on the assumption that you do need to communicate with people, just go and practice. Learn a little, go and practice. You can learn it from everywhere. From the internet, from a good movie, from a book, from a little video, even from a picture on the wall. You can learn a tremendous amount. But the key thing here is just go and practice it. Doesn't matter what you're saying, you've got to go and practice it to find out if someone's listening. And that's the message that we've got to leave with anybody. And again, that's the can-do attitude. So if you haven't been listening and you're not going to go practice, good luck, because life's going to be tough. Sorry about that last message, but it's true.
You know, I would like to add here is while, you know, your advice is very important, because practice and learning never stops, as you had mentioned earlier during our discussion. So there are two options myself and my viewers can have access to. One is they can practice on their own, or second is we can help facilitate a session with you which will make things much faster. So you can actually come up with some tricks of the trade, which will help our viewers and listeners, and they can approach you and learn the trade of faster communication or better effective communication.
Yep, there's always help if people are looking for it. Sometimes that help is free, but frankly, it's never free because you've got to listen to it. So even just because you're paying for something doesn't make it more valuable. It means that that's the only way you're going to get access to it. But there's an awful lot of free things out there. But remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's always perhaps a catch there. So don't get caught into it. Listen to what's being said, then go and take action. If you really want to take it further, you're the best person to come back to, because there's tremendous amount of resources on the website and with the people that you've got working with you, including me. I'm not a bad resource.
Certainly, I think I would definitely like to avail your knowledge and improve myself, and I'm sure our listeners, some of them would like to do that as well. So with this message, I just leave my viewers with this message, and it's always fun to talk to you, Neville. However, we have limited time, so
Yeah, always.
so and it's a huge subject. I think we cannot cover in few minutes. So with this, I will say goodbye for today. But next week we will discuss on something much more interesting, which is related to the attitude. And I will catch up with you next week again.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Chandra. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you, Neville, and have a nice week. Bye-bye.